Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are going to push some buttons. We are tackling a topic that sits right on the jagged edge of the human mind. And honestly, it forces us to question how we know what we know. We're looking at belief.
Right.
But not religious belief or, political conviction. We're looking at what happens when the mechanism of belief actually breaks. We're talking about delusion.
It is a heavy word, isn't it? Delusion. In, common parlance, we just use it as an insult.
Oh, all the time.
You go on Twitter or Reddit, and if someone disagrees with you about a movie or an election, you say, you're delusional. It's just become a synonym for stupid or wrong.
Right.
But as we went through the source material for this deep dive, which includes medical literature, historical case studies, and some very dense psychological theory, we see that delusion is something far more specific.
And way more terrifying.
And frankly, far more terrifying than just being wrong.
That is exactly the mission for today. We want to find the boundary.
Yeah.
Because we all have that uncle who has incredibly stubborn political opinions.
Of course.
We all know someone who refuses to look at data that contradicts their worldview. So where's the medical line drawn? At what point does a strong, stubborn opinion cross the border into a pathological diagnosis?
To answer that, we have to start with the strict clinical definition provided in the literature. And it is deceptively simple, but every single word carries a lot of weight.
Okay.
A delusion is defined as a fixed belief. A fixed belief that is not amenable to change in light of conflicting evidence.
Let's stop on that phrase, not amenable to change.
That is the core of it. It isn't about the content of the belief, not necessarily. It's about the rigidity.
Right.
You can be wrong about the capital of North Dakota.
Bismarck?
Exactly. But if you believed it was Fargo, that's just misinformation. It's a mistake. If I show you a map and you look at it and say, oh, my mistake, it is Bismarck.
Then your brain works.
That proves your brain is working correctly.
Yeah.
You have cognitive flexibility. You process new evidence and updated your software. A delusion is rigid. It is a belief held with absolute certainty that no amount of proof, no maps, no data, no logical arguments can dislodge it. The brain has lost the ability to update the file.
Okay.
But, and this is a crucial qualifier that the source material really highlights, this belief cannot be shared by your culture or your religious group.
Oh, that feels like a massive loophole, though.
Yeah.
If I believe something totally unprovable, like the rain only falls because we danced, but everyone in my village believes it.
Then that is faith, dogma, or sociology. It is not pathology. Psychiatry is very, very careful here.
Okay.
If everyone in your community believes that a specific ritual brings rain, that is a cultural framework. If you and only you believe that the CIA is controlling the weather using your kitchen toaster,
then we have a problem.
Then that is pathology.
So it's the solitary nature of it that matters.
It is profoundly solitary. A delusion is a private reality that no one else can enter.
That's a lonely image. Now, looking at the research you pulled, I was honestly shocked by the sheer variety of these things.
It's a huge spectrum.
Yeah. I think when we hear delusion, we rely on the old tropes. The guy in the tinfoil hat or the person who thinks they're Napoleon. But the menu of delusions is so much stranger and more specific than that.
It really is. And today we're going to break it down. We're going to look at the different flavors or, categories of delusion, the biological mechanisms, literally what is misfiring in the wiring of the brain. And then we have to talk about the controversy.
The Martha Mitchell effect.
The Martha Mitchell effect. Because, and here's a teaser for you listening, sometimes the person with the delusion turns out to be right.
And that's where it all falls apart.
And when that happens, the whole system of diagnosis it falls apart.
I can't wait to get to that story. But let's start with the categorization. The source material breaks this down into 4 main groups. This isn't just a random grab bag. There is a system to how doctors sort these, right?
There is. They categorize them based on 2 main axes. The content of the belief, meaning how weird is it, and its relationship to the person's mood. So the first major split is between bizarre and non-bizarre delusions.
Bizarre seems like a very subjective word for a medical textbook to use.
Yeah.
I mean, modern art is bizarre. My neighbor's lawn decorations are bizarre. Is that really a clinical term?
It actually is in the DSM-5.
Yeah.
And it has a very specific threshold. A bizarre delusion is defined as something that is clearly implausible, not understandable to peers in the same culture. And this is the key. It does not derive from ordinary life experiences.
Can you give me a concrete example from the notes?
No.
Because implausible is still a bit vague.
The source gives a very graphic, very specific example. Imagine a patient who believes that someone has replaced all of their internal organs, their liver, heart, intestines, with someone else's organs.
Okay.
But they believe this happened without leaving a single scar on their skin.
Okay, so that's physically impossible. You cannot swap a liver without cutting someone open.
Precisely. It defies the known laws of physics and biology. That's what makes it bizarre. It cannot happen.
Got it.
Now, you contrast that with a non-bizarre delusion. These are false beliefs, but they are technically possible.
Like what?
Like believing you are under police surveillance.
Okay.
Or believing that a coworker is slowly poisoning your coffee. Or that your spouse is cheating on you.
Though those things do happen. I mean, people do get investigated. People do get poisoned. Spouses definitely cheat.
Exactly. It is within the realm of reality. It is highly unlikely that the entire FBI is parked in a van outside your house specifically, but it isn't physically impossible in the way a scarless organ transplant is.
Right.
That makes it non-bizarre. It becomes a delusion only when there is absolutely no evidence for it and you refuse to believe otherwise.
So if I think my wife is cheating on me and she isn't, and I'm hiring PIs and checking her phone every 10 minutes, that's a non-bizarre delusion.
It's called delusional jealousy. And yes, it's considered non-bizarre because it derives from ordinary life experience. It's a story that could be true, but in this case, it just isn't.
Got it.
Yeah.
Now, what about the mood connection? You mentioned the other split is mood congruent versus mood neutral.
This helps psychiatrists determine if the delusion is part of a mood disorder, like bipolar or major depression, or if it's something else like schizophrenia.
Right.
Mood congruent just means the delusion matches the emotional frequency the brain is vibrating at.
So if I'm depressed...
If you are in a deep psychotic depression and you believe the news anchors on television are secretly mocking you,
Wow.
or that you have committed some terrible sin that has doomed the world that fits the mood, you feel terrible, so your brain invents a terrible reality to explain that feeling.
And the flip side, mania.
Mania. If you are in a manic episode, super high energy, feeling invincible, sleeping 2 hours a night, and you believe you are a powerful deity, or that you've just invented a machine that solves world hunger, that is also mood congruent.
The belief justifies the feeling of power.
It absolutely does.
Which leaves mood neutral.
Which is just a glitch. It's random. The example given in the text is believing a limb is growing out of the back of your head.
Okay.
That doesn't really stem from being sad or happy. It's just a raw error in reality processing. It's noise in the signal.
Now, before we get into the specific themes, which are wild, I saw a note here about the French. Apparently, French psychiatry handles this categorization a little differently than the Americans.
This is a really interesting nuance. French psychiatry is heavily influenced by psychoanalysis, and they make a distinction that we don't always see emphasized as clearly in American textbooks.
Okay.
They distinguish between two types of paranoia, paranoid and paranoiac.
Okay, my French is rusty. Walk me through the difference.
So paranoid or paranoid delusions are typically what we see in schizophrenia. The key feature here is that they are disorganized.
Disorganized how?
The structure of the delusion is just messy. The speech is confused. The thoughts are scattered. They might think the CIA is chasing them 1 minute and then think they're a ghost the next. It shifts.
It's chaotic.
It's chaotic. It's like a kaleidoscope that keeps turning.
And the other one? Paranoid.
Paranoiac or paranoiac.
Yeah.
This is observed in a condition called paraphrenia, and these delusions are highly systematized.
Systematized.
Meaning organized. The person is very clear, very logical within their own framework, and usually focused on a single, intense theme.
So this is the person with the wall of yarn and thumbtacks.
That's the one. They might have a wall full of charts and diagrams proving their conspiracy. It's not messy at all. It's a perfectly built house with straight walls and a solid roof. It's just sitting on a foundation that doesn't exist.
That is a fascinating distinction. One is chaos, the other is a trap of logic.
Exactly. And the systematized ones are often harder to treat because the person can argue their case so effectively.
Let's look at those themes, because the source material lists quite a menu of delusions. And what struck me is that the human mind, when it breaks, seem to break in specific patterns. We don't just invent random things, we invent the same things over and over again.
We do. We see the same archetypes cropping up across history and culture. By far the most common type is the persecutory delusion.
The classic, they are out to get me.
Yes. Being followed, poisoned, harassed, conspired against. But the source makes a good point here. For it to be clinically a persecutory delusion, it needs two specific elements.
Okay.
One, you must believe harm is occurring or going to occur. And too. You must believe the persecutors have the intention to cause that harm.
So it's not just, I have bad luck.
Right. If you think, man, I keep hitting red lights, the universe hates me, that's just venting. A persecutory delusion is, someone has hacked the traffic grid specifically to make me late.
If personal.
It's personal. It puts you at the center of the narrative.
Then we have the grandiose delusions. We touched on this with mania.
Right. Believing you are famous, omnipotent, or have supernatural powers. The source notes these often have a sci-fi or a religious bent to them.
Which makes sense. If you feel powerful, your brain grabs the biggest symbols of power it knows: God, aliens, advanced technology.
Precisely. Your brain is trying to find a costume for the feeling. Then there are somatic delusions. Soma means body. This is where the person believes something is wrong with their physical function or appearance.
The most terrifying one listed here, for me at least, is delusional parasitosis.
It is genuinely the stuff of nightmares. This is the belief that you are infested with insects, mites, or bacteria.
But they don't just think it right. They feel it.
That is the tragedy. They experience what we call formication, a tactile hallucination where they can physically feel bugs crawling under their skin.
Oh, that's awful.
They will often scratch themselves raw or bring samples of dust and lint to the doctor in a matchbox, insisting they are parasites. It's incredibly distressing because their senses are lying to them.
You're trapped.
You're trapped in a horror movie that only you can feel.
And then there are the really specific named delusions. Some of these sound like movie plots. There's the delusion of control.
Where you think external forces are pulling your strings, like a puppet.
Or thought broadcasting.
Oh, yeah. Imagine the anxiety of walking into a room and believing that your private internal monologue is being transmitted via a speaker system to everyone around you.
I would never leave the house. That sounds paralyzing.
It creates immense social withdrawal. But there was one that stuck out to you because it's actually becoming less common, right?
The delusion of poverty.
Yes. This is the belief that you are financially ruined, destitute, or that you have lost everything, even when your bank account is full.
The source says this was more common back in the day.
Widespread in the 19th and early 20th centuries, before state support and welfare systems were a thing.
That is fascinating. It implies that our delusions track with our societal fears. When there was no safety net, people went crazy fearing poverty.
Exactly. Now that we have more social safety nets, people are less likely to hallucinate that they're destitute. Instead, in the modern age, we see more technological delusions.
Microchips. Surveillance.
Right.
Yeah.
The culture changes the fear. The content of the madness updates to match the times.
Speaking of specific delusions, we have to talk about the capgras delusion. This one feels like a philosophical problem as much as a medical one.
Capgras is haunting. It is the belief that a loved one, a spouse, a parent, a child, has been replaced by an identical imposter, a doppelganger.
So they look like your wife. They
Wow.
sound like your wife. They know everything your wife knows.
Yeah.
But you know it's not her.
And the person will often be very calm about it. They'll say, oh, yes, that looks exactly like my husband, wonderful actor, but where is my real husband?
How is that even possible, neurologically?
Yeah.
Because they are seeing the face, right?
We think this happens because of a disconnect in the brain. We have two systems for recognizing people. One is visual. The ventral visual stream says, that looks like mom.
Okay.
The other is emotional. The amygdala gives you that warm glow of familiarity you feel when you see someone you love.
So face recognition plus emotional glow.
In capgras, the visual wire is intact, but the emotional wire is cut. So you see the face, but you don't get the feeling. Your brain is confused. It thinks, if that were really my mother, I would feel love. I don't feel love. Therefore, this must be a fake who looks like her.
It's logic gone wrong. The brain trying to explain the lack of emotion by inventing a sci-fi scenario.
It's a desperate attempt to make sense of conflicting data.
Before we move to the causes, I have to bring up James Tilly Matthews. The source has this illustration of the heirloom.
Yes, James Tilly Matthews. He is often considered the first documented case of paranoid schizophrenia, specifically regarding this machine.
This was late 1700s London.
Late 1700s, and he believed a gang of spies, a gang of villains, he called them, was tormenting him using a machine called an heirloom.
An heirloom.
He drew incredibly detailed diagrams of it. It looked like a massive weaving loom, but it used magnetic fluids to control his mind and the minds of politicians in the House of Commons.
So it's a prime example of a delusion of control.
It is.
Yeah.
But again, notice the technology. In the late 1700s, looms were the cutting edge of industrial tech. and mesmerism-magnetism was the trendy pseudoscience.
Right.
If James Tully Matthews were alive today, he wouldn't talk about an heirloom.
He'd talk about 5G.
Or AI, or Neuralink. The technology changes, but the fear, I am being controlled from the outside, remains the same.
So that's the what. We've got the heirlooms, the imposters, the bugs. Now let's talk about the why. What is physically happening in the brain to allow these ideas to take root? The source mentions a two-factor model.
This is a leading theory on the pathophysiology. It suggests that for a delusion to really stick, two things have to go wrong at the same time. It's not just one glitch.
Okay, what's factor one?
Factor one is a dysfunction in the belief formation system. Your brain just generates a weird idea. Maybe that flicker of light was a signal. Or maybe that person looked at me funny.
But we all have weird thoughts. I might think, did that person just glare at me? But then I look again and realize they were just squinting at the sun. I dismiss it.
Exactly. You dismiss it. That is where factor two comes in, dysfunction in the belief evaluation system. Specifically, the source points to the right lateral prefrontal cortex.
The internal fact checker.
The conflict monitor. In a healthy brain, that part of the cortex says, don't be ridiculous, that was just a light bulb flickering, ignore it. But in a delusional brain, that region is compromised.
So the filter's broken.
The filter is broken. We see this in stroke patients. If you have a lesion in that right lateral prefrontal cortex, you lose the ability to fact-check your own reality.
So the weird thought gets in factor one, and nothing stops it from becoming a fixed belief factor two.
Precisely. You can't verify the truth, so you just accept the bizarre thought as fact. It's like a computer with no antivirus software. It just accepts whatever download comes in.
But what drives the weird thought in the first place? Why does the brain suddenly think the light flickering is a message from God?
That brings us to the chemistry. We need to talk about dopamine and the concept of salience.
Salience is a word that comes up a lot in this research. Can we define that for everyone listening? What does it actually mean here?
Salience is simply the quality of standing out. It's the brain's way of tagging something as important. If a tiger walks into this room right now, it has high salience.
I would hope so.
Your brain focuses on it immediately. It matters. The air conditioner humming in the background, that has low salience. Your brain filters it out. You don't even hear it.
Okay.
The aberrant salience model suggests that in psychosis, the brain is flooded with dopamine. And dopamine is the chemical that assigns salience. It's the highlighter pen of the brain.
So the tagging system goes haywire.
Exactly. Suddenly, the hum of the air conditioner isn't background noise. It is flooded with dopamine. It feels intensely important. It feels like a message.
Wow.
You are sitting there looking at a red car passing by, and because of the chemical spike, you feel a profound sense of significance.
You feel like this means something.
You feel it in your gut. It's an undeniable sensation. And your brain, which is a logic machine, tries to make sense of this intense feeling. It asks, why is that red car so important?
And it concludes,
It must be following me.
that makes so much sense. The delusion is the story the brain invents to explain the feeling.
Yes, the feeling comes first. The story follows. The delusion is actually the brain's attempt to explain the chemical storm it's experiencing.
It's not that they want to believe crazy things. It's that they are feeling crazy things and trying to logic their way out of it.
Correct. And the source mentions that studies have confirmed this. High levels of dopamine, specifically the metabolite HVA, are directly linked to delusions of jealousy and persecution.
But it's not just biology, is it? It's not just a broken circuit board. The source also lists environmental triggers.
No, biology is the hardware, but environment is the software. One major trigger mentioned is sensory deprivation. Delusions are significantly more common in people with poor hearing or sight.
Really? Why is that?
Well, think about it. The brain abhors a vacuum. If you aren't getting clear data from the world, your brain starts filling in the gaps. If you are hard of hearing and you see two people talking in the corner but you can't hear the words,
You might get suspicious.
you might start to suspect they are whispering about you. Your brain projects its fears into the silence. It's a predictive machine. And without data, the predictions get wild.
That's logical, in a sad way.
Stress is another huge factor. Immigration, low socioeconomic status, the accumulation of daily struggles, these all increase the risk. And then there is the defensive function theory, or motivated delusions.
Is this the idea that the delusion is actually protecting the person?
Yes. Imagine you are struggling in life. You can't find a job, your relationships are failing, you feel small. That is painful to your self-esteem.
Right.
It might be psychologically easier to believe I'm failing because a powerful government agency is sabotaging me.
Rather than I am failing because of my own choices.
Exactly. The delusion preserves the self-concept. I'm not a failure. I'm a victim. In fact, I'm such a threat that the government is spending millions to stop me. It turns you into the hero of the story.
It's a shield. A heavy, distorting shield, but a shield nonetheless.
And culture shapes what that shield looks like. The source highlights a fascinating contrast between Austria and Pakistan.
I saw this. This is a comparative study.
Yes. In Austria, which is a Western Christian context, delusions often center on guilt and punishment.
I've sinned.
I have sinned, I am being punished by God. And in Pakistan, the delusions are far more likely to be about persecution without the guilt. They are trying to hurt me. The underlying brain structure is the same, but the culture provides the script.
So if you are in Vienna, you think you're a sinner. If you are in Lahore, you think you're a target.
Broadly speaking, yes. It shows that madness is not culturally neutral.
So we have the types, we have the causes, the broken fact checker, and the dopamine flood. Now we get to the hardest part, diagnosis. How does a doctor actually look at someone and decide this is a delusion versus this is just a weird belief?
For a long time, the gold standard came from a philosopher and psychiatrist named Karl Jaspers back in 1913. He gave us 3 criteria.
What are they?
1, certainty. The patient must be absolutely convinced. 2, incorrigibility. You can't talk them out of it. And 3, impossibility. The content must be bizarre or patently untrue.
That seems solid. Certain, stubborn, and impossible.
It seems solid, but the source suggests it is actually very problematic. For one, research shows delusions fluctuate.
Yeah.
People aren't always 100% certain. They have moments of doubt.
So the certainty rule doesn't always hold up.
Right. But the bigger problem, the dangerous problem, is the impossibility or falsity criteria. Because sometimes the delusion isn't false.
This brings us to my favorite part of the research, the Martha Mitchell effect.
This is a classic cautionary tale in psychiatry. It should be taught in every medical school.
Oh.
Martha Mitchell was the wife of John Mitchell, the United States Attorney General under Richard Nixon.
This was the early 70s Watergate era.
Right. Martha was a socialite, very outspoken, and she started telling reporters that there was illegal activity going on in the White House. She claimed her husband was involved in dirty tricks, that she was being followed, that her phone was bugged, and that people were physically trying to silence her.
And what did the doctors say?
They said she was delusional. They dismissed her claims as the ravings of a mentally ill woman. It sounded paranoid, right? The Attorney General's wife claiming a massive government conspiracy. It fit the profile perfectly.
It had the persecutory theme. It had the grandiosity.
Exactly. She was even sedated against her will at one point. The narrative was, Martha is crazy.
And then Watergate broke.
Watergate broke. And it turned out she was right.
Wow.
She wasn't delusional. She was informed. She was arguably the most sane person in the room. But because her reality didn't match the consensus reality of the doctors, she was labeled insane.
That is terrifying. So the Martha Mitchell effect is when a psychiatrist mistakenly classifies a true belief as a delusion because it just seems unlikely.
Exactly. It's a failure of verification. The doctor assumes, this sounds crazy, so it must be crazy.
And the source notes this happens with less famous people too.
All the time. Imagine a patient comes in claiming their spouse is cheating on them. They are obsessed, following them, checking their phone. It looks like classic delusional jealousy. But what if the spouse is actually cheating?
Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they aren't out to get you.
Precisely. If the belief is true, it cannot be a delusion no matter how weird the person acts. This is why the diagnosis is so hard. You have to be a detective, not just a doctor.
Which leads to the criticism by R.D. Laing, right?
Yeah.
He was a pretty radical psychiatrist.
Very radical. He argued that diagnosing something as ununderstandable is just lazy. He said it relies on the doctor's subjectivity. If I don't understand your world, I call you delusional. If I do, I call you eccentric.
It's about power. The doctor holds the power to define reality.
Exactly. It brings us back to that cultural boundary we talked about at the start.
So if the definition is slippery, how do they treat it? If you can't just talk someone out of it, what do you do?
Standard treatment usually involves antipsychotics, which dampen that dopamine response we talked about.
Turning down the volume knob on salience.
Exactly. So the air conditioner stops feeling like a message from the CIA. It just becomes an air conditioner again. It reduces the intensity of that feeling of significance.
And therapy. Can you therapy your way out of a delusion?
It's hard. CBT is used to help people test their beliefs, and
Right.
there is metacognitive training, which helps people think about how they think, catching themselves jumping to conclusions.
But there was one creative therapy mentioned that caught my eye.
Yeah.
It involved science fiction.
Yes, this is a fascinating outlier. Researchers at Yale used novels and films in what they call projective therapy. They specifically mentioned using a novel by Philip Jose Farmer called Red Orc's Rage.
How does reading a sci-fi book help with schizophrenia?
The novel itself deals with delusional adolescents being treated with projective therapy. It's very meta. The idea is to approach the delusion tangentially.
Tangent.
If I tell you your belief is wrong, you will get defensive. You'll lock the door. But if we talk about the character in the book, why does he think that? Is he seeing things clearly? It allows the patient to analyze the concept of delusion without feeling attacked.
That is brilliant. It's like entering the delusion to lead them out of it, rather than banging on the door from the outside.
Exactly, because if you bang on the door, if you challenge a fixed belief directly, the person usually just reinforces the lock. That's the nature of the condition. You have to find a side door.
So what does this all mean? We've looked at the bizarre organ swaps, the heirlooms, the broken prefrontal cortexes, and the tragic vindication of Martha Mitchell.
I think the synthesis here is that delusions are a perfect storm. It's not one thing. It's a mix of brain chemistry, that dopamine spike making everything feel important, combined with a broken evaluation system that can't fact-check, all shaped by your personal stress and cultural background.
And it seems like the line between a normal belief and a delusion is thinner than we'd like to admit.
It is incredibly thin. The source explicitly mentions that many religious or strongly held political beliefs share the exact same features as delusions.
Like what?
Absolute conviction and resistance to counter-argument. The main difference is often just how many other people agree with you.
Which is a humbling thought.
It connects back to that aberrant salience model. Our brains are designed to filter reality. We have to filter it or we'd be overwhelmed. A delusion is just a filter error. It's the brain deciding that this specific thing is the most important truth in the universe.
So here's a final provocative thought for you to take with you today. We learned about the Martha Mitchell effect, where a delusion turned out to be true. And we learned that our brains construct reality based on what they decide is salient.
Right.
So if our brains are just biological machines filtering data and sanity is just when our filters agree with everyone else's, how much of what we consider objective fact is just a shared hallucination? If a delusion can be true, is sanity really about truth, or is it just about consensus?
That is the question. And I'm not sure we have a pill for that one.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. Stay curious and maybe double-check your filters every once in a while.
Take care.